Hi everyone, this is Professor Hall. So if you have not already seen the first and second lectures about A Princess of Mars, make sure that you go back and watch those. I do a brief summary, and then we talk a little bit about the elements of the book in terms of genre and subgenre. So today we are going to look at the science in this science fantasy work, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the book. So let's get started. So the hard and soft sciences I've talked about before. I'm not going to read everything here, but basically they're these are terms used to compare scientific fields based on the methodological rigor, the exactitude, and the degree of subjectivity. So we have the soft sciences. A lot of times they're under this umbrella: communication, cultural studies, law, psychology, criminology, geography, linguistics, which we'll talk about more next in a week or so. 2 weeks. We look at linguistics involved in the book Flowers for Algernon. But the natural sciences, the hard sciences, physics, biology, astronomy, the social sciences really are described as soft because they cannot be tested in the same measure of objectivity as some of the hard sciences. Although I know people who teach and study linguistics and psychology who would disagree. So that's kind of an important thing to note. But at any rate, Burroughs' novel really focuses... I am missing an apostrophe. Boop. Focuses primarily on the soft sciences, particularly anthropology. So, to begin with, though, we'll look at astronomy and geography. The topography of the planet is based on scientific studies of Mars at the time. We talked about this a little bit with H.G. Wells' book, but basically around 1877, they had stronger telescopes that were able to see Mars, which was at that point was closer to Earth. So the Italian astronomer saw unnaturally straight lines kind of crisscrossing the planet as depicted here. He speculated as to whether these might be artificial canals, and then later American astronomer Percival Lowell published Mars and Its Canals. And I have to say, I don't know if the date is correct there, because we talked about how this was used in H.G. Wells' book, which was published in 1897, The War of the Worlds, that possibly the canals showed that there was life on Mars. So artificial canals or natural evidence that there may have been water at some point, some people said, and other people said, no, there must be life on Mars. So this book being published in 1912, here we have another look at the canals of Mars. In the Barsoom series, the planet is dying. They have a dry, arid climate, not unlike the Arizona desert, where Carter finds himself as he's prospecting. Their so-called canals are waterways that are throughout the landscape, and they really determine where the people live, not unlike Earth, where many people have resided typically around the coastlines and near bodies of water. The red Martians, who are kinder and advanced in different ways, have built cities along these waterways, and they have much fertile ground than a lot of the other drying land. The red Martians are really trying to protect these tracts of land rather than exploiting them for their resources. So there's a lot of there are many ecological messages here, which is to us, over 100 years later, quite unusual, but somebody is really already in 1912 considering the importance of ecology and the importance of protecting and taking care of the Earth. And you saw some of these same things in War of the Worlds, where the Martians are terraforming their planet, and there's a warning there to us to not use up our resources. But outside of these canals, there's really very little water. So Carter is often drinking milk from a plant that grows without water in the Martian desert. That's going to be quite important to note. Because again, the warning is like without that plant, he may have died because this is a dying planet that people have not taken care of. Dejah Thoris, the Princess of Mars, related many interesting facts and legends concerning this lost race of noble and kindly people. She said that the city in which we were camping was supposed to have been at the center of commerce and a culture known as Korad. It had been built upon a beautiful natural harbor landlocked by magnificent hills. The little valley on the west front of the city, she explained, was all that remained of the harbor, while the pass through the hills to the old sea bottom had been the channel through which shipping passed up to the city's gates. The shores of the ancient seas were dotted with just such cities, and lesser ones in diminishing numbers were to be found converging toward the center of the oceans as people had found it necessary to follow the receding waters until necessity had forced upon their ultimate salvation the so-called Martian canals. So we have a couple things here. Geography in terms of this planet, where people are living, how they are living, how the planet is dying, how Carter is almost being called not just to save Dejah Thoris, but also possibly the world, and a warning for other people as we evolve and use more technology and use more of our Earth's resources, that we have to prevent this from happening. There's also this idea of the eighth ray of the sun. I love this. Charles Fritz installed the first solar panels on New York City rooftop in 1884. Did you know? Most people don't. But this is from Smithsonian Magazine. So a little bit of science here in terms of hard science. Gravity is used to explain Carter's physical prowess in Barsoom or on Mars. We also see Martians use advanced technology. So they have small noiseless engines that are buoyant, and the explanation for this is that they're able to fly due to power from the sun's rays and gravitational repulsion. Now, does he have an exact understanding of science with this idea of the eighth ray of the sun? No, but certainly he's looking forward to a time of solar power. So that speculation is quite interesting. And there's a little quote there about the solar eighth ray, which propels the light of the sun to various planets and that type of thing. So the explanations might sound pseudoscientific, but really know that this is kind of building off of what was known about solar energy at the time. We have the first solar cells produced in 1883 and installed in 1884. And some historians credit him with the invention of solar power. Not the silicone type we know today, which was invented in the 1950s, but certainly a very early form of this. So, yeah, it's quite interesting that this is part of Carter's journey through Mars to see some of their technological advancements, even though a lot of this book is based in the soft sciences like anthropology. So I have this picture because I want to say this before I talk about anthropology. Some of anthropology has been quite problematic throughout history because it's the study of human behavior, and many times it's like this. This guy from a privileged white background goes with this guy from a privileged white background, and they take a camera and they talk to people that they see as weird or different. And I think certainly this book is kind of a reflection of that. So it's going to be really important to kind of look at this book from really, there is racism going on here, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And yes, they are Martians, but I think you can see the same racism go on in Burroughs' book, Tarzan, and some of its sequels as well. That Carter is really supposed to be the superior white man, and he is coming in and trying to save the red Martians, fighting the green Martians, but that clearly he is superior to both. But at any rate, the study of scientific behavior really was a growing field during the last 3 decades of the 1800s and into the 1900s. Anthropological societies and associations were often being formed in conjunction with evolutionary studies. So this, again, very racist idea that certain cultures have evolved and certain cultures have not. But what's really important to note is that by 1898, there's about 50 colleges that have anthropology departments. By the early 1900s, when this book is written, there were faculty that were really dedicated to that study. And there was a four-field approach. They looked at biology, they looked at sociology and culture, they looked at archaeology, and then they looked at linguistics. So he is writing at a time when we go from 50 colleges to hundreds of colleges that have these departments, that faculty are not just biologists who happen to dabble in anthropology, but that they're really dedicated to this field. And the world building is entirely dependent on understandings of anthropology. Again, we have Deja Thoris here, not read, as she should be. Very often the action and adventure of the story is paused so that Carter can kind of act as an anthropologist. He is studying the Martians and he's giving details about their culture. He's talking about how he learns their language. And in fact, Burroughs really used serialization of this book to his advantage. The episodic structure is like a travelogue. John Carter goes to various places of Mars and talks about the cities and states and the anthropological similarities and differences of each new group. So it is quite interesting, and I do want you to, in some ways, appreciate this, but in other ways, look at this book 100 years later through the eyes of someone in, now we're in the 2020s, right? And think about how our world has changed and how it has not in terms of how we look at different cultures. We certainly now have discussions about the racist view of other cultures, about white privilege, but also cultural appropriation and things of that nature that really, at the time this was written, were not being talked about at all, and really people did not have, for the most part, people did not have a conscious understanding that this is what they were doing. I love this picture. Again and again and again, Deja Thoris as a white woman as opposed to a red Martian. Quite apparent, even from this book cover in, I think, the 1970s, looks like. So, evolutionary terms and anthropological terms. The green Martians and the red Martians have evolved from different, I think, the black and white and possibly yellow Martians. The green Martians are vicious warriors. They capture Carter upon his arrival. He avoids being killed by showing extreme physical prowess that impresses them. That's something that's valued by their culture. We see some of the biological and sociological reasons that the Martian culture is so vicious, and certainly Sola is kind of outside of this culture in a way. She is not as vicious, and therefore she's not accepted. Children are born from eggs. They're kept in incubation for 5 years. The eggs hatch. They're assigned to female Martians who are really expected to teach them to fight. So the lack of traditional family structures and bonds results in this lack of compassion. And from an anthropological point of view, this is quite interesting. So look for some of those details. We also have some linguistics, this mixing of science with fantasy. There's an entire chapter dedicated to Carter learning the language of the Martians. He learns the language quite easily, even though it's a full chapter. But it's kind of indicating, again, that these Martians are technologically advanced, but not as good as us humans, especially American men. They have this fantastical element as well. Martians use telepathy in addition to spoken language, but Carter is somehow able to learn this telepathic technique as well. So he uses it to open doors via telekinesis. So there's this interesting mix of science and pseudoscience and fantasy that I just find fascinating and a kind of an advanced idea at the time. Stephen King's book Firestarter, and Carrie also, Firestarter is pyrokinesis, being able to start fires with your mind. Carrie uses telekinesis to move objects and things with her mind. So I think his books as well, kind of an interesting mix of these like scientific but sort of pseudo-scientific ideas. And they're unable to read his mind, but we don't really know why. It's a little bit of a plot device and a little bit of a place where he's asking you to suspend disbelief. So then we have also biological anthropology, which we kind of talked about before. Why is Sola compassionate compared to the other Martians? Here, a green Martian, but Sola is depicted in kind of a womanly form, right? She's got a bikini on. She's got a little veil over her face for no apparent reason. In chapter 15, we learn that Sola knew her mother. Most green Martians do not know their parents. She was born out of a love affair. So not this typical egg in an incubator type of situation. There are further differences between the green Martians and the red Martians. Again, they evolved from the yellow, black, and white Martians who mated long ago in Martian history. And we have these depictions of different spaces that the black, yellow, and white Martians used to occupy. So look for those details as well. How has this society evolved? How has this evolution caused differences? And also, because of these differences, the red Martians are really more interested in scientific knowledge and saving their planet, and the green Martians are really more interested in war. So I think you can see some of this in shows like Star Trek, where we have like different alien races and how they approach life and how they're different from humans. And then again, a lot of times the humans are shown to be exemplary and better than everybody else. So here's a little excerpt. "What will be the manner of her going out?" inquired Sola. "She is very small and very beautiful. I had hoped that they would hold her for ransom." Sarkoja and another woman grunted angrily as this evidence of weakness on the part of Sola. "It is sad, Sola, that you were not born 1,000,000 years ago," snapped Sarkoja, "when all the hollows of the land were filled with water, and the peoples were as soft as the stuff they sailed upon. In our day, we have progressed to a point where such sentiments mark weakness and atavism. It will not be well for you to permit Tarkus to learn that you hold such degenerate sentiments, as I doubt that he would care to entrust such as you with the grave responsibilities of maternity." So, just in this short little excerpt, we see some of the anthropology and the social structures of this society that Sola is hoping that they won't kill this woman, and she tries to say, "Oh, hold her for ransom." But the other women see this as a sign of weakness, and they are hardened. They are warriors because there are not resources on this planet, and they are fighting over the resources. The red Martians are protecting the resources and trying to find ways to increase them, but the green Martians really are fighting over them. And this idea that in history we have progressed, we have evolved past that point where we are weak and we are soft. And so look for some of these changes and the talks of history and how things have changed. In terms of ecology, this is another thing that the book kind of explores, these resources that I was just talking about. The Martians have technology, but it's clear that wars and misuse of natural resources really have ruined the planet. So despite the immense technological achievements, there's really nothing they can do to stop the slow but kind of gradual decline of their world. Ecology, conservation, and peace are really intertwining themes in this book. And Burroughs warns against the unhindered exploitation of the environment, heedless development of technology, unchecked expansion of human habitation. Just to kind of sum that up. Other themes in the book. There's There's Sola, there's Deja Thoris, there's John Carter. So sexualized. I don't know why all the art for this book is sexualized. I mean, it is a romance, and I guess that might be why, but it's like, it's a very like male driven view of this world. So, ecology, as I mentioned, misuse of technology, the idea of the noble savage, that is kind of looking at people from this other race, and people like Sola, who, yeah, she's a savage, but she's like us. She's one of the good guys, right? That she's somehow above the rest, for various reasons, but almost again, yeah, we're looking at them like Martians, but they really are supposed to be almost like a different race, and so it is in that sense a little bit, not a little bit, quite a bit, centered on whiteness and Americanness. John Carter is a typical Southern gentleman, so look for the idea of how Southern gentlemen should behave. He is, of course, gentleman, singular, but the idea of how Southern gentlemen are supposed to behave, and also coming out of the Civil War, this almost holding on to these old supposed Southern values that were before the Civil War, of the gentry and how they treat others. Gender roles and expectations, I've kind of mentioned this throughout, but there are different gender roles for the green Martians than certainly there are for the red, and really the green Martian women are responsible for helping to train the children for battle. In terms of John Carter's role, he is the strong man who is supposed to rescue the woman, which is, again, kind of like a fairy tale. The racial differences, which I've talked about a little bit, this idea of colonialism and imperialism, that here you have, instead of the Martians invading us, we're invading the Martians, and we look at them as if we might be superior to them, and it's not exactly colonizing them in this book, but the idea is there that, they've misused their resources, and perhaps something could be done about that. War and peace, love and compassion, tribalism as these groups battle against each other, but also, even the green people are not depicted completely as monsters. They certainly, as we saw in the discussion with Sola, they have reasons for the way that they have developed, and their anthropology, their social structures are quite important to them. Civilizing influences, and this idea of the frontier, that he is in the West, and that was at that point still a little bit frontier of America as we pushed westward and really developed the country, and that also that space could be the new frontier and this place for adventure and romance, just like the West. So that's it for this book. I really hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you see the mixture of these hard and soft sciences alongside each other, how biology and anthropology kind of interact, a little bit of linguistics, and a lot of enjoy the book for what it is, enjoy the story, enjoy the romance, enjoy the adventure, and then kind of also at the same point, look at it through the lens of people today, and think about how it would have been read differently back then, and how the book really is kind of a product of its time, particularly in terms of some of these themes that we have been talking about. So that's it. I can't wait to read your thoughts. Thanks, everybody.